Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 295 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by my co-host, as always. He is Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way, joining me for our Day 6 training camp recap, sort of a week retrospective, as well as we're going to be joined by Sports Illustrated's Daniel Flick here in just a minute. Before we do, Adnan, how are we doing today?
Doing well. I'm tired. I'm really tired at this point. Training camp, we love training camp, gotta love it. But I mean, Kevin, you know about that day-to-day grind about it. I managed to steal an hour nap here
Yep.
a little while ago. So,
Elite.
I'm very
Yeah.
grateful that we have an off day tomorrow. I'm sure the players are grateful, but the media members are also very grateful that we have, a day off tomorrow, and then it's right back at the Bends for day 7, which I'm expecting to be the absolute climax of training camp. It's going to probably be very raucous over there, and then one more day on Monday before the team departs for that joint practice in Miami. So yeah, it's been a grind, but you got to love it. We do it for the love of the game.
We do indeed. And joining us to continue our talk on Falcons training camp for the first time during this year's camp is Daniel Flick. He's at by Daniel Flick on the Twitters. Daniel, welcome in. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. If I look like I just got out of the shower, it's because I did. Life at training camp, right? Got a little run in tonight and hustle for you all because I love the Falcoholic, man. So
yeah. I know the
really
internet was giving you issues too. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, happy to have you. Appreciate you making the time, and we'll go beat up the internet hamsters if we need to make sure that it gets going here. But thank you, guys. We're gonna be bringing you our update on the first 6 days of camp. We're gonna get Daniel's take as well. Talk about today, day 6, is as well second padded practice. So appreciate everyone for coming in and hanging out with us. Before we dive in too deep, I want to bring you guys a real quick word from our sponsor. Once again, it's BetOnline, folks. BetOnline is the most trusted betting platform on the internet and your number one source for everything online sports betting. And right now, they've got a promotion going on where you can receive a 50% free bet up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball, Formula One racing, you name it. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. And when the game's over, you can head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of their over 150 slots games. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head to that website today, BetOnline, to get in on the action. Just remember to use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. Well, guys, busy practice today. First of all, Daniel, I haven't been there in person to check on it. Sunburn levels, how are we doing? Adnan looks like he's survived so far. You're looking a little pink today. How's it going?
Yeah, I've been pretty good. I've been told that I tan really well. I don't burn so much as I tan, which I hope it stays the way the rest will see. Adnan and I were talking today about how it was a very eggs got cooked. We'll see, but for now it's good. For now it's all good. It was a little bit, kind of hot today. The last few days haven't been bad. It was just because it was about 8:50 when they started, so it felt nice, and progressively got hotter and hotter. I feel all right. I feel fine for what I expected. July, Atlanta, flowery brand. I feel worse than it's been. What I'm really appreciative for the player.
I think we might officially. Yeah, Brandon, we're working on it. I think we might officially be losing. We might be losing you, Daniel. I don't know if you want to reconnect or you could try turning off your video. That helped Adnan when he had an issue the other day too. Just because
it's actually flowery branch. They're trying to set us.
They're hacking. They're crossing the streams. They're trying to hack.
They're hacking the mainframe at this point.
Yes, but no. Daniel does tan well. That is official. So we'll have to see how early the tan arrives this year. It seems like it's off to a strong start, but I know Adnan.
We've been very lucky because it's been very cloudy. I mean, Well, we've been less lucky down in Atlanta that it's been raining literally every day for 2 weeks nonstop, and it got to the point where it shut off power at Flowery Branch last night. Practice started a lot earlier this morning as a result. But yeah, it's been very cloudy. I got some burns like on the back of my neck because you can still sunburn through the clouds. But yeah, I was worried about the back of our legs today. Like I was worried about our calves because that's one of those underrated like body parts where you're watching it and you're not realizing that like that's burning because the sun is hitting like directly on it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, my biggest issue, I don't know why I wore all yellow today. Um, like literally head to toe, all yellow. You can ask Daniel. That was my outfit today. And I literally had like 3 bees trying to pollinate me for like 20 minutes. They were just all around me because they thought I was a flower.
Adnan is our beautiful flower, that's for sure. So, I'm glad the bees are
It's
getting in on it.
true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
He
He
wasn't
really
all
is.
yellow. I was also swarmed by bees though, and I was not in all yellow. So it was not just you, Adnan. Trust me.
Okay. Well, yep. I'll have to take your
They're
word for
sending
it.
the bees. They are sending the bees after us too, after the media members.
They're calling in all the powers out there. You're gonna be out there pretty soon, being chased around by what other, I don't know, red-tailed hawks or
By that
cicadas.
bear,
Yeah.
by those bears that Caleb McGarry killed, apparently. Like that's
Yeah, I mean, we can't. We're already like like Caleb McGarry may or may not dislike us. Can't confirm. We did get that one glare, but again, could have been coincidental. Could have been thinking about something else, and we just happened to walk in front of him. So we don't know. Caleb McGarry's an intense guy. It could just be that he's carrying that intensity into the parking lot. We can't be sure. Didn't didn't want to impede him. He looked like he had places to be. But yeah. Speaking of practice and the offensive line, it sounds like there's a lot of pass rush juice out there today. Daniel, as our guest, tell me about it. It sounds like there was quite a bit of sacking going on now that we actually have pads and you can have some simulated pressure actually, work.
Yeah, I think what was really impressive about today is that there were 6 sacks, I want to say, in the 11 on 11 period. And half of them were from linebackers, which I think is really important to note because, one thing that even like the Arthur Smith era and that staff spoke extensively about, you can generate pressure from more than just, the edge. And I think Atlanta, one thing that I've seen throughout the entire offseason, they've gone a lot heavier with the fronts they're rolling out. Like we've seen a lot of 5, even I think I want to say yesterday I saw like a 6-man front. Like they are really, really loading up the line of scrimmage with linebackers especially. And I think it's I want to say Jimmy Lake or might have been Raheem said on Saturday something along the lines of, we're going to play people in roles where we're going to maximize whatever it is that we feel like they can, perform at their very best. And it seems like real coach speak, but then you watch it and it's actually what, the roles that they're putting certain players in. It's like, okay, that makes sense for them. And it's like a specific package for them. They've had like Ellis lined up. I've seen him play more Sam linebacker so far in camp than I saw it like throughout all of last year, which I think is really, really important to note. They had, I want to say they've had each linebacker, throughout that whole room in that role as well. It's something they're really stressing. And if you don't have necessarily the elite horses in the stable off the edge, you got to find ways to become creative with it. And I think they have so far. There were sometimes, again, I think sometimes the numbers are a bit unrepresentative because you have like, say, the starting defensive line playing against offensive linemen who won't make the, roster. And that's a bit, again, misleading, unrepresentative. But even today, there was a lot of ones versus ones and more, equal talent on the field, and the numbers still were what they were. And so on that front, I think it was a very encouraging morning.
Yeah, no, it certainly sounds like it. And I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add to the pass rush discussion. It's certainly the I think we all sort of suspected that they were going to be needing to manufacture some pressure, so that's not terribly surprising, but still very interesting to actually see.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Lake after practice today was talking about how they're going to bring in some complexities on this defense to try and give opposing offenses some headaches. Where he said, you'll have some guys that you expect to be rushing the passer, drop back in coverage. You'll have some guys in coverage come up to rush the passer. He said that, the secrets to a success of a good pass rush is all 11 guys, which, obviously it is. It's not just the guys up front, it's the guys in coverage, forcing the quarterback to hold the ball a little bit. But yeah, I was speaking to you, Kevin, before the show a little bit. I saw a couple of fronts today where, it was the 3-4 look. And, instead of a nose tackle, you had Caden Ellis line up over the center, standing up, and then Troy Anderson line up over the center, standing up. There was a couple of looks these last couple of days where I noticed Troy Anderson, playing on the inside, where, inside the shoulder of the guard, but, standing up instead of his hand in the dirt. So they really are trying to sort of, you know, look at every single trick in the book a little bit, to try and manufacture some sacks, to try and manufacture some pressure because, I don't really believe in the ability of these edge guys to consistently win one-on-one. So I do give the coaching staff credit for trying to do their part in, helping some of those pressures out a little bit. But it is interesting and it is very creative. And I do know for a fact that I would not have been allowed to tweet that, but I can talk about it all I want on the show.
That's right. Could put that, in our exhaustive, training camp notes article, which is live on the site, thefalcoholic.com,
Which it is. Yeah, all of that
Yes.
stuff is on the training camp notes, by the way. They can't tell me what I can and can't put in my notes either.
I guess they could tell you, but you don't have to listen. I guess they could just not allow you back in. But let's not tempt fate with this yet. But yeah, it's definitely I'm interested to see. First of all, it's nice to see the defense like have a bounce back, another like good day, and again with the pads on for the first time, that's typically an opportunity for the defense to get more ability to impact plays. One-on-ones of course always favor the offense and that sort of thing, and especially without pads and limited contact, there's not a ton of options for guys to slow down pass catchers, particularly when it's a lot of one-on-one drills. So it's good to see the defense having a stronger performance. I think people were kind of panicking after watching Kirk Cousins and Penix dice up both the starters and the second string defense. And I think maybe some people are just like not used to like seeing that happen ever, especially not us last year, because we didn't see the offense do that to the defense, ever, in like the first 7 days of training camp. So definitely nice to have some offensive life, but also good to have some balance. And again, like I think ultimately what you want is the offense probably winning, a good amount of the time, and the defense winning a good amount of the time too. You don't want one side to dominate. You want, again, it's one of those old cliches, right? But you want the iron sharpening the iron. You don't want to beat up on an inferior opponent because that doesn't make you better, and you don't want one side just dominating either because it's hard for the side that's losing to get much better if they're just completely outmatched and not really able to mount much of a defense. So definitely excited to hear more about the defense. But yeah, Adnan, anything else on the defense you wanted to touch on? I haven't had a chance to really peruse your notes much, so I don't know where you want to go next with this. But
Yeah, the other thing with the defense that I noticed that was a bit of a, difference today as opposed to before is Eddie Goldman. A lot of people have just had the best things to say about it, Eddie Goldman. Everyone we've talked to who has been asked about Eddie Goldman has made a comment about how he's in great shape. Jimmy Lake today was talking about how good his conditioning is now compared to the way it was when he first showed up this year. And Eddie Goldman was getting some run with the first team today. So far, it's been almost exclusively second team, but today, I saw him in that nose position with the ones. I think Eddie Goldman legitimately might stick this year. Like I don't think he's going to retire in camp. this season based on what I've seen. But yeah, I think Eddie Goldman has a really nice chance of making this roster. I think the coaches really value what he brings to the table. They value his experience, and it is nice to see him sort of, flourishing a little bit in camp and getting that opportunity a little bit in camp after, we haven't really seen it the last couple of years. And, Eddie talks, we got a chance to talk to him after the practice at second year high school, and he seemed incredibly genuine in talking about how he just really missed the game of football and just how, fortunate and blessed he is to sort of have this opportunity to be back, with the Falcons again. So yeah, that was one of my big, sort of lineup stories from today, that we are seeing more Eddie Goldman with the ones.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember all the memes, right, about oh, Eddie Goldman's made it, through OTAs. He's made it through minicamp. Oh, he's on the roster for training camp. And like once I saw he was on the roster for training camp, I put him on my 53-man roster. I was like, okay, I think this is the break glass in case of Eddie Goldman actually sticking on the roster scenario. And the reason is, like, when he's played, he's been at worst an average starter, and in some years a plus starter. And he's just, it's not like a guy that, like, when he retired, he was doing it for personal reasons, not for medical reasons, right? I think he's still only 28, 29. It's not like he is at the end of his playing career or anything like that. And honestly, the lack of wear and tear on the body might mean that he's, healthier than a lot of defensive linemen entering their early 30s potentially. But I do really like Eddie Goldman. The Falcons don't have a lot of true nose tackles on the roster, and really, it's Goldman, it's rookie Zion Logue, who, I mean, I think we all like, and is a Georgia guy, right? So we'll see if he can make some noise. But and then I think like Tommy Togiai is maybe the other nose tackle, but Goldman probably is the one you're hoping is good enough and is returning to his sort of previous ability level, where you want that veteran nose tackle, and that'll give Zion Logue some more time to sort of develop. But curious what you thought about the surprising reemergence of Eddie Goldman, Daniel, so far.
How's my audio? Is it okay now?
I believe it's okay. It's still a little pixelated in terms of the video, but yeah, I'll let you know.
Okay. Yeah. Eddie Goldman, the one thing I really want to talk about, I asked Jay Rogers, because he was in Chicago with Eddie a few years ago. I asked Jay Rogers, with as mentally taxing as I imagine the last few years of, for Eddie, if he's still the same guy that he was then, or just how he's mentally changed, if he's more mature, things of that nature. And because you'd imagine with the time away that he had, that maybe it matured him, or it just kind of like changes his outlook on everything. And Jay said no, he's the same Eddie. And I thought that was really interesting to me. Because again, this is a guy who straight up said, like, hey, it had zero to do with anything in football. It was entirely personal, and it was not something that he wanted to talk about. So it's, the situation there is very, very, I'd imagine, loaded for Eddie. And so for Eddie to come back, and for him to be, because again, in Chicago, he was a very impactful player, and when Atlanta signed him in 22, it was like, okay, this is a pretty big get. And so the fact that he's still, engaged mentally, and has that same approach that he had in Chicago, I find to be very important, and very relevant to what he's accomplished so far here. I also, on the line, I don't want to, jump ahead, or, ruin a future segment here, but I do want to give James Smith-Williams his flowers as well. And I'm sure you already have, in prior episodes, but, Adnan kind of mentioned it earlier, the roles that they've had the linebackers in. I think James Smith-Williams is very interesting because, when Atlanta signed him, he's a guy who they had a variety of assistants looking at, because there's a vision that they had for him where, is he an end? Is he, a straight edge guy? Like, how are we, planning on using him? And it's really been interesting to watch how they actually have employed him, because they had him at, kind of that inside shade of McGarry's shoulder. They've had him outside. They've had him up. They've had him, hand down. They've had him in so many spots where it's like this guy's really versatile and clearly an important part of what they want their running packages to kind of look like. And that's also the one thing that Raheem mentioned, is that they view this guy as a high caliber edge defender against the run. Kind of the same deal with Lorenzo Carter too. And so that's for me one of my main takeaways so far, is you're seeing the creativity with how they plan on rushing the passer, but they feel really confident that in their 3-4 looks that they've got the horses there to where they can probably stop the run without having to actually, load up that box and really send extra bodies in there. So in terms of personnel, I think it's been really interesting to watch.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And again, it's like, yeah, James Smith-Williams, another guy that I think was kind of an unheralded signing. I think we all thought, oh, okay, this is probably a guy they want in. He's got the experience. He's a reliable veteran, good run defender, that sort of thing. I think the surprise was seeing like, oh, this guy's like starting. Like he is out there with Lorenzo Carter a lot of the time. And, maybe it shouldn't have been as shocking considering they did sort of make him like one of their only defensive signings like early in the offseason. But James Smith-Williams is solid, and it seems like he's a guy they trust to play a role. Again, not really going to be inspiring a lot of fans to think that this pass rush is going to be great if James Smith-Williams is your starter. But again, you could do a lot worse than having him as a part of your rotation. And I guess the idea is probably that Arnold Ebiketie, it seems like he's probably still going to be relegated to the designated pass rusher role. But, Ebiketie's pass rushing statistics are actually pretty solid. The run defense has been very spotty for him. So it seems like maybe they can just mix and match, and that's kind of the plan. And we'll see how that plan works out. I know that's probably the biggest concern fans have in terms of the defense right now, is how the pass rush looks.
That's why Smith-Williams sort of, is the starter on paper, just because 1st and 10 is that it's a running down in distance where, most teams are sort of running on the first play of the game. So that tells me that, JSW is starting because of that, because, it's for the run defense right off the bat, but it's a heavy rotation. It's a big rotation with that edge grouping with 5 main names. Smith-Williams and Lorenzo Carter were mentioned. Arnold Ebiketie, Braylon Trice he's getting some good reps with the first team. He had a sack today. It seems like they are going to rely on him to make an impact year one. And then you have Caden Ellis, who has, like Daniel mentioned, gotten a lot of looks at that Sam position. And that's going to be one of those kind of scenarios where Jimmy Lake talked about it today. There's going to be some moments where they look to, play all 3 inside linebackers at the same time. And, all 3 of these guys, no matter who starts, no matter who wins this competition, and, I have no idea who is going to win this competition between Anderson and Lamb, and I think we can transition into that next. But no matter what, all 3 of these guys will make an impact. And yeah, part of that will be, Caden Ellis. He's your best inside linebacker up the middle, but at the same time, Caden Ellis also, has sort of a knack for, sort of getting to the quarterback on that blitz a little bit. We saw it with the Saints a couple of years ago. He had 7 sacks, and I mean, shit, I would sign up right now for Caden Ellis to have 7 sacks.
Yeah, I think we all would. Yeah. Did you have something to add, Daniel?
Yeah, with the inside linebacker, spot, the analogy that I have, this is kind of a very random comparison, but for the college basketball fans out there, the 2015-2016, no, 2013-2014 University of Kentucky men's basketball team that was so deep where they would legitimately just bring in, a blue team and a white team. Like they would completely they had like a full rotation of backups. That's what this group feels like to me. Where Atlanta has a group of guys where if it's a obvious running situation or an early down situation, you'll see this group out there. But if it's more of a passing situation, then they'll have this group out there. And I think it was the 2 minute that they had today. It was Anderson and it was Ellis throughout the entire drive. To me, what that says is, okay, we're going to have our more athletic linebacker out there in that setting, which is what you'd expect, right? But for the most part, when they've had their, regular 3-4 look, I feel like Landman's probably seen a heavier snap count. And so I do think it's more, package and scheme dependent, and very much so situational as well. And so I'm not sure we'll reach a point where it's like clearly a finished battle. Like I think this might be something where it's the entire season. It's like, okay, this guy played more in this game because of the way that it played out, because of, they were ahead more. And so whoever they're playing had to throw it more. So as a result of that, you're in more nickel looks or whatever. And you've got Troy Anderson out there more. I really do think it'll end up playing out like that because as Adnan said, like they are very deep there. Those three guys are all impact players, right? And that's like I mentioned earlier with what Raheem said at the high school. They are going to try to maximize what they have, and as opposed to regular coach speak, I feel like this time it's legit, and you can kind of see that, like, okay, when they have a clear vision for how they want it to look, and I feel like we're starting to see it kind of play out already too, because it's like you have AK as a pretty clear pass rush guy, has not exactly looked very good against the run so far, but he doesn't have to, right? And he kind of mentioned that yesterday that he views himself more in that primary pass rush role, and again, he had 6 sacks last year. If he can make it 8 this year, Atlanta will be thrilled, right? And so it'll be a very heavy rotation. They have the bodies for it. And I think it's like you've got guys who are really, really good at specific things, maybe not as well rounded as some other units out there. But if you're able to put them in those spots, there's no reason that this group can't play at a level close to what it played at last year, if not higher. And again, that unit for the most part last year, up until about week 17, really was probably a top 12 group across the league. So we'll see, man. But there are some pieces there, and the way that I've seen them utilized so far, very encouraging.
Yeah, no, I think it's exciting to see that, and they're gonna have a rotation. They're gonna play a lot of different guys. I'm excited to see how it shakes out, and hopefully everyone could we'll steal a line from the Patriots, just do their jobs right, and everything will be fine. Again, I don't think we're looking for this. I mean, I think we'd all like it to be, but we're not really looking at this as like a high end pass rush with star guys on the edge. We're looking at this as like maybe we can get to average by cobbling things together, by blitzing a little bit more, by doing a lot of simulated pressures, by bringing some unexpected rushers or putting the offensive line in some challenging situations with those simulated pressures. And maybe that can do enough. Like last year, we didn't exactly. I mean, we did add Calais Campbell, who was a big help, but like we didn't exactly have this star-studded pass rush otherwise, and the Falcons were able to get above 40 sacks because of some creativity and the way they were able to stress teams out with their interior pressure and stuff like that. So maybe there's a scenario where that could work out, maybe not, but certainly I'm choosing to lean a little bit more on the hopeful side, and by hopeful I mean sort of expecting at average at best, right? And that would be okay. That would certainly be better than it usually is. I think a lot of people would like to aim higher than average. I think ideally we do starting next season, but if they can get through this year with average pass rush, that's probably what we're hoping for at this stage. But I did want to touch on the play of the secondary because I know there's been some head turning plays, some picks and things like that over the last few days. And Adnan, I know yesterday we were talking about it a bit, but yeah, how's the secondary been looking? I think we got some more one-on-one opportunities and such today as well. So
I mean, yeah, it's I liked what I saw from the secondary, both yesterday and today. Clark Phillips had a very solid day. I saw Antonio Hamilton also had a good day. Antonio Hamilton had a hell of a pass breakup against Darnell Mooney early on 11 on 11s. And then he, I don't want to say he was exactly stride for stride with Drake London, but he was very close to Drake London on what looked like a go route, which Kirk Cousins overshot a little bit. But today in those one-on-ones, I'm not exactly sure, but I think the defense won more of those battles, even though you did have Kyle Pitts getting his victories and Drake London got his victories. But I think overall we had more pass breakups in the one-on-ones than receptions. But yeah, the secondary they've been solid. They've been solid. They've kept everything in front of them. I have not seen too many, deeper pass completions since the pads came on. Whereas, the first couple days they were just getting dissected in the secondary, every which way. But you know, it's a lot tougher when you're in shorts and when the guys up front can't really be as aggressive because that it all works together, right? The guys up front and the guys in the secondary. It's sort of the chicken and the egg of the importance of you need to, like Jimmy Lake said today, you need to force the quarterback to hold on to the ball out of the secondary to give the pass rush a chance. But at the same time, the pass rush needs to get to the quarterback to make life easier for the guys in the secondary. But yeah, I've Mike Hughes is clearly the cornerback two of this team right now. Like there is no competition like we thought it would be. But Clark Phillips has looked good overall in camp. He has what I count as one of the two interceptions overall, along with Jesse Bates' one yesterday. He recovered a fumble today, where I think in a real game it would have been overturned into a drop for Rondale Moore. But the coaches and the refs called it on the field as a fumble. That they don't have a replay out there. They didn't have the video board because of the power outage. So we'll give it to Clark for that one today.
We'll allow that. We'll allow it. But yeah, no, I think it's good. I know, Daniel, I know you were a big fan of Clark over the OTAs, and I think we're all a little bit surprised that the competition has been so one-sided thus far. But it does seem that Mike Hughes has been pretty solid, and I definitely like the idea of Mike Hughes on the outside more than the inside. But what's your sort of take on how that cornerback room is shaken out through the first week of camp?
Yeah, I want to say, Adnan, I think the Atlanta Falcons official Instagram account posted the video of the play. I did not see the ball hit the ground.
Oh,
So I think it was an interception. I think I would call it an interception, which is really unfortunate for Penix because it was a really good throw. But
it was his second best throw of the day, in my opinion. Like
I
it
agree.
was a zip pass, and Rondale needs to hang on to it. Like
Yeah.
Rondale Moore, not your
Yeah.
possession receiver,
But I will say, for Rondale, that was probably Rondale's first. I wrote this actually in my recap from 2 hours ago. That was probably Rondale's first real mistake that was like evident in a few days. Like he's been really really good lately. I feel like actually had his first few snaps with the ones I think all of training camp today.
yes,
So
Yep.
so he is trending up, which is very very encouraging for him. But yeah, I've spent a lot of the last week trying to figure out why Mike Hughes is where he is. And I
UCF
feel like
legend. Okay. Yeah.
UCF legend. Yeah, yeah, man. I mean, so the one thing that I feel like I've grasped a lot of, they feel like I think the image that a lot of fans have of Mike Hughes from last year is not the image that Atlanta has of him from now. And I think a lot of it is the inside versus the outside argument with him. He is a lot more comfortable playing outside, a lot more comfortable. The one thing I had a one-on-one with him yesterday about this, and he mentioned in it that in college the only time that he played inside was when he was playing as a shadow corner, and so he had very few snaps at nickel in college. Almost all of his college snaps were outside. Almost all of his snaps early on in Minnesota were outside. That's just where he's played the most throughout his entirety as a high-level football player. And it's tough when you get moved inside, and it's not home for you, but it's where you have to play to actually play on Sundays, right? And so he feels a lot more comfortable. The Falcons feel like what he's shown this year is more of the player that got drafted in round 1 in 2018 in Minnesota, which, mind you, Jerry Gray was a part of that staff in Minnesota. Very fond of him. There's a lot of praise in there for the way that Hughes has played. And I straight up asked Jimmy Lake today, like, you're very high on Clark Phillips. Why is Hughes starting? He mentioned, that they feel like Hughes had a very, very strong spring, very strong. And his veteran presence, very important in that as well. He's a little bit more steady, I think, is how they perceive it. I don't think Hughes has been bad at all in camp. I think Clark has been a little bit better, but I think that Hughes, if you're entering camp as the starter, and what Adnan said, very clearly the starter, he hasn't done anything to where you'd be overly concerned about it. So it's kind of interesting, but he I think is a guy who a lot of fans may be surprised when they see him this year, just because he outside is not the same guy that he is inside. And so I think he's excited about the chance to try and change some perceptions around him. I think the Falcons think that he's more than capable of that. And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily to have this problem of, we have two guys here who we think are pretty good, complementary pieces at corner. And so I also want to praise Antonio Hamilton as well. As I said, I thought he was, great today. He was very good in ones, had it again, the pass breakup he had on Mooney. There have not been a lot of times in camp the last week where corners, had their hands on a pass that Cousins threw. Like, that has not been a very common part of camp at all. And so that was an impressive play. That was straight up, very good read, very good break, very good play on the ball. I think he's a pretty safe bet as at number 5 corner. I think the real competition at corner right now, probably Kevin King and Anthony Johnson for the last spot if Atlanta carries 6 corners, which I think it will. So that feels like it's kind of alternating each day. And that's something I've been monitoring, and I think Miami and the joint practices there will be very, very helpful, and kind of see how that shakes out.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see. Like, I do feel like, people are certainly having some issues with, like, oh, is the number 2 cornerback, like, for the Falcons good enough for this team? But I do believe, like, the top 5 corners are actually, that group in total is actually pretty strong altogether. Like, obviously AJ Terrell's a good one. The number 2, there's questions. I think D. Alford's a great slot corner. I think he's gonna have a very good season. I'm very confident in him now that hopefully they will actually play him. Cough cough. But I think their depth guys in Clark Phillips and in Antonio Hamilton, I think these are guys that probably start for teams. So I think having those guys as your top 2 depth guys kind of insulates you from injury. And look, when you're playing 3, maybe 4 corners, depending on what your opponent's doing, like, corners are going to go down. Like, your corner's one of those spots that you just need depth because you're playing so many of them. It's just the chances of the same 3 guys playing all year are almost zero. So having Clark Phillips, having Mike Hughes, having Antonio Hamilton, and Antonio Hamilton apparently they're cross training at the slot as well, so he should be able to do a little bit of everything. I like the depth of that group a lot. But yeah, Adnan, what are your thoughts sort of on that, how that corner room is shaking out?
I mean, yeah, it's I like the depth of it too. Like, don't get me wrong, we all have our questions about cornerback number 2, and I don't think those questions have been answered a week into camp. Like, no matter how how decent Mike Hughes has been so far, we'll need to see it, during the season. But it's not fair for me to say, oh, it's good or bad right now if if he's doing what he's supposed to thus far. But yeah, what we will have to see during the season. Hopefully, Mike Hughes does go back to the way he was a couple years ago in Kansas City when he played on the outside and actually had a really solid year. I think he had a PFF grade over 70 that season. So maybe he was just sort of being used out of position last year, and that was the reason for the struggles, even though we have gotten, quotes. I think it was either Raheem Morris or I think it was Raheem Morris who talked about how much he liked the versatility of the cornerback group of all of our cornerbacks. Um, where Mike Hughes can play on the outside and on the inside, Clark Phillips as well. But one thing is for me is, and I mentioned it in yesterday's show, if Mike Hughes does struggle, you have Clark Phillips sort of waiting in the wings to take over that cornerback two position if that's needed. So we know AJ Terrell is there. He's steady at cornerback one, and then beyond that, yeah, it's just like with the linebackers. I feel like there may be a season long competition, uh, where if one guy doesn't play as well as the coaching staff is expecting, then you have another guy waiting in the wings, and then we haven't even mentioned D. Alford. He continues to be steady as the primary nickel cornerback on the first team. I don't think that looks like a competition at all either. He is just as solidified there as Mike Hughes is at cornerback too.
Yeah, no, I like the like bones of this group. I think we'll have to see how it plays out. Like I don't, I'm contractually obligated to not slander Mike Hughes beyond a certain point. From my years in Orlando. So I'm hopeful that he's a better fit outside. But it is just I agree. It's sort of a little bit puzzling that he is so it's seemingly entrenched. And like again like I I'm gonna say it. Like I think Jerry Gray is a big fan of Mike Hughes. I think it's clear. And I suspected this was a thing when Mike Hughes ended up playing again towards the end of last year, despite D. Alford outplaying him pretty much the entire time and continuing to do so. And I think it's mostly been confirmed again in that Mike Hughes has now found his way back into the starting lineup. And maybe he is a legitimately better option playing outside. Like that could also be a thing. But I think just I don't know how many teams Mike Hughes would get this much runway on other than this one. And, maybe Jerry Gray and the rest of the coaching staff will end up proving themselves right that Mike Hughes does deserve this opportunity and is a good fit. But yeah, I agree with you guys that I'm kind of surprised that his runway has been so long. And I mean, I get the idea of it. Like the reason he was a high pick is because he's got good size, he defends the run pretty well, and like he should have all the measurables to play the position well, and did play the position really well in college. He was also a really good returner. But that all obviously hasn't really translated to the NFL either. So it's tough. I'm certainly pulling for him for more reasons than just that he's a UCF guy. But, it would be good for the Falcons if he was good and they did have that depth, because no matter who's starting, you want to have good depth behind him. But we should probably talk about the offense a little bit, this is a very pro defense episode here, which I've appreciated. But yeah, I mean, Daniel, I haven't really gotten a ton of your thoughts yet, but I'm curious your thoughts sort of on Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix over the first week at camp. I know that generally everyone's been pretty positive, but I wanted to get your thoughts too.
Yeah, I think with Kirk, it's a lot of the same thing that I saw from him in OTAs. He's really good at football. Um, really, really good at football. Like it's honestly watching him throw and just he's so consistent. He's so steady. It's really been impressive to watch. You would think for a guy who has been throwing to this crop of receivers for 4 months now that there'd still be a little bit of a okay, he's trying to establish that rhythm, that relationship. So really, it hasn't been that way at all. Even like after a few weeks of OTAs, I was impressed by the timing that he had, and the rhythm that he'd found. And I continued to just be blown away by how well he sees things. And when the Falcons signed Kirk, I distinctly remember in Orlando, it was either Raheem or Terry. I think it was Terry said that they viewed Kirk Cousins as a multiplier. As a guy who not only is he upgrading the QB spot, but as a result of the player that he is, the leader that he is, he upgrades everyone around him as well. And I think that what he has done so far for Kyle Pitts has been incredible. And the one thing that has stuck with me for the last several months is Zach Robinson saying that even if Kyle is not the primary, he may get 7 catches in a game, and 2 or 3 of those may be on plays where he's the primary read. The other 4 or 5 may end up being when he's the number 3 read. But because you have a processor in Cousins who is so quick and can work through multiple reads, it just enhances and it improves the role of everybody in that offense. And I think it adds to the intensity of each route you're running, because it's like, okay, even if I am option 3, the ball still might find me. Right. And I think Kyle Pitts, not only is he healthy, but he looks energized. And I think a lot of that is because of, again, the rhythm, the accuracy, the leadership that the Falcons have with Kirk Cousins. And I've just been blown away. I think from top to bottom, he's been phenomenal. He's been exactly what Atlanta wanted. High caliber leader, highly respected already in that locker room. Great dad jokes, again, exactly as you would expect. Him and I had a nice conversation about trail mix earlier today, which was great. But yeah, I think Cousins has so far lived up to every expectation you'd have for a guy who's making 100. Well, who signed a $180 million contract. We'll see how much that he actually ends up getting. But he's been impressive. I think Penix more consistent now than what he was in OTAs. I thought in OTAs he was a little bit more sporadic. There have still been some highs and lows, but again, he's a rookie quarterback. That's what you expect. Me and Mark Ramundi were chatting today about his arm is just so impressive. He obviously Penix, not Mark Ramundi, but Penix's
We haven't
arm.
seen Mark throw the ball yet, so you never know.
You never know.
True, we'll see. We'll see, man. I think he'd be a heck of an offensive lineman. I mean, just the hands on that guy after however many years covering wrestling and boxing.
Oh yeah,
have to be impressive. But
yeah.
No, he kind of reminds me like a really competitive, undersized edge rusher, Samson Ebukam type of guy. But no, I think Penix very impressive. Love the arm talent there. Again, you can see his leadership traits too. I think one of the plays or the moments that he made that has most impressed me was at the high school on Saturday. John Fitzpatrick had a drop that was his 3rd in 2 nights, and it was a really well thrown slant that they were in the red zone. So Fitzpatrick was in the end zone. I think it was the last play of the red zone drill too. So it was a pretty important play for that period. Great throw, and just dropped it. And Penix went up to him, hit him on the helmet, and had a brief talk of what I would imagine was pretty encouraging words. And it was like, okay, that's a guy who, even though he's not in this prime leadership role, he is still trying to show how he's wired, why he won the locker room at Washington, and why the Falcons think he'll win it again once it's his time. And so off the field, very impressive. On the field, you can see the flashes, and I'm excited to kind of watch him play in Miami in a week. And again, I think his preseason will be very, very telling for where he's at as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm excited to see how it plays out. I know, it's obviously great hearing Kirk is doing so well and seeing that, and we don't have to dwell on the quarterback play we witnessed in last year's training camp. I think we all remember. So it's been a pleasant surprise to see all these positive clips, and all the memes about who threw that are very funny, obviously, and we can hopefully put that dark past behind us. But I'm really glad to see the Penix and Cousins relationship. It hasn't become a problem. I know there was definitely fear, from myself included, after the pick came down, that is Kirk going to get upset about this? I mean, this is kind of weird and all that stuff. But I do appreciate that they've been able to clearly get over that quickly, and I'm sure Cousins is going to be a great mentor for Penix. And at the end of the day, I just want Penix to be great. And if he is, then no one's going to question it, and we'll get over it. But yeah, I'm excited to see that. And yeah, Adnan, did you have any further thoughts on Cousins and Penix after day 6?
I mean, I think today was probably Cousins' worst day overall among the four, and it was still far and away much better than anything we saw last year in training camp. Um, but yeah, I mean, just to echo it, you can sort of tell the difference in the energy level around the entire building and the difference in optimism around the entire building when it comes to having an actual, quarterback of Kirk Cousins' caliber in that quarterback room. Arthur Blank met with the media yesterday. I think it was the first time he's met with the media since they fired Arthur Smith, or since they hired Raheem Morris, since the coaching, changed. And Arthur Blank made a comment about how he's more optimistic now than he has been in several years about this franchise's ability to contend. And, he did mention the quarterback room as, one of the reasons for that optimism. Terry Fontenot today mentioned, just sort of the difference in the quarterback room as something that was, a cause, for some optimism on his end as well. And, it's just sort of, I, I don't know, it's sort of just funny in real time seeing, last off season, everyone sort of defend the decision to go with, who was in the quarterback room last year and just, try to convince all of us to sort of buy into it. And now, you come here and it's like, oh, yeah, no, like we were bad because of the quarterback room last year, and now we're like a lot more optimistic. Which, I mean, yeah, obviously you will be a lot more optimistic because Cousins last year played at, I think, maybe the highest level of his entire career. And that's saying something because Kirk Cousins has had a hell of a career. But last season, before leading up to that Achilles injury, I don't think many people remember just how good he was. Like, he was going to be, named to his fifth Pro Bowl appearance. And Kirk talked himself the first time he met with the media. He said that he thinks his best football is still ahead of him. He used Tom Brady as sort of an example of, some of those quarterbacks, some of those high end quarterbacks who are so good at the mental aspect of the game, how they kept playing so well into their late 30s, and he did say he wanted to emulate that a little bit, and that he thinks he will emulate that. So I mean, yeah, it's, of course there's a reason for optimism. I don't think a single team in the NFL, upgraded the quarterback position. I know not a single team in the NFL upgraded the quarterback position the way the Atlanta Falcons did. And, this team won 7 games last year despite the quarterback play. And, this season you add in a guy who is a Pro Bowl caliber level player on that end. And, it's no wonder that the optimism has sort of spread. It starts with the owner, and you can see the optimism within the fan base with, the team selling out their season tickets for the first time in over 20 years.
Yeah, I'm certainly excited to have competent quarterback play. I like the idea of both these guys. I know we're going to get to see Kirk this year, and I'm excited about that. And um, you know, I think Falcons fans as a whole were pretty spoiled by Matt Ryan, and that's natural when you have such a great quarterback for so long for that to happen, right? You just get a little too comfortable with the quarterback position, and I don't know if that happened to Arthur Smith. I don't know if that happened to Arthur Blank, that they're like, well, we can find another quarterback. We'll throw Matt Ryan out of town, not talk about that, and just draft a guy in the 3rd round, and that should be fine. It was not fine, for the record. Record scratch. It was not fine, but
And Arthur Blank keeps talking about that mistake too of, we don't ever want to go through what we went through after Matt Ryan, and he kept He mentioned that like 3 times, when talking about the Michael Penix pick during his press conference yesterday.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, look, if Michael Penix is the future franchise quarterback, then take as many victory laps as you want, because great job. But I think we're a little ways away from knowing the answer to that. Probably at least 2 years, if not 3, if not more. So, we might want to pump the brakes on the Penix hype. But I think it's been encouraging so far. I think he's shown what you want to see, which is competent quarterbacking, good flashes, you know, with some struggles to be expected. But so far, I've been pretty encouraged by what we've seen. But I did want to touch on one last group, and that's the receivers and tight ends. And I know, Daniel, you mentioned that Rondale Moore was getting run with the ones today for the first time. That's great. I think we've all been pretty impressed with the play of the starters, but curious your thoughts on sort of how that wide receiver and tight end group is shaken out.
Yeah, the one thing that a lot of Atlanta's assistants have mentioned throughout the spring and the early part of the summer with that receiver room and how much they've completely remodeled it, they wanted to add speed around Drake London. And I think that while we haven't necessarily seen the vertical element pay off that much, I think you can still see the pieces that they have in there are pretty impressive. I think Mooney has. I think that Mooney is the number 2 receiver that Atlanta's needed opposite Drake for a while. And I think that the one thing Ike Hilliard said to me in May that has stuck with me is that he is as advertised, and the Falcons think that Mooney has a lot more to show than what he produced in Chicago last year and in 22. And so I really think I mentioned this on our pod, Kevin, a few weeks ago, that I think he can very easily hit about 800 yards. And so I think there's real optimism around him, and I think that he has lived up to a lot of the expectations that a lot of people had for him. I'm not sure there's been a more pleasant surprise, at least from my seat, than what Ray McLeod has brought in that slot role. More of a return specialist for much of his career. The Falcons wanted to give him a chance playing slot, and I think so far he has been everything you could have asked for, and then some. Very, very explosive player, very quick. I think there's some ways that they may end up trying to feature him at times in the motion game, the screen game, where I think they're going to try to find ways to let him have the ball in space. And again, at that point, it's almost like the traits that he has as a returner can show up after the catch. And again, very explosive returner. So I think that would be a very exciting element to add offensively. He has had a few drops, and that's a little concerning. He had one today on a slant that was well thrown that should have been caught. But again, for an offense that'll probably have more 3 receiver looks than last year for sure, but still not an excessive number, because I think they will have Pitts rolling in the slot pretty frequently. I think Ray in that role has been very impressive. I think Kadero Hodge too has had a pretty good camp, and very much so a forgotten figure in that room, but reliable, a true leader, someone who will be on the roster. A lot of attention that I've seen. I think Casey Washington has a lot of fans, and I think for good reason. Very smooth athlete, very good operator. Love his body control. Love it. I thought, watching him at the high school a few nights ago, I was just blown away. Just he had a few catches right up the sideline that I'm still honestly not sure how he was able to stay and drag his feet and find ways to actually finish the process on some throws that were not very good. But he hasn't really been a standout in the team periods. He's been more of a standout in routes on air, which is very easy to stand out in. So I think it's interesting that they brought in James Washington and brought in Jesse Matthews, and Casey's been primarily working with the 3rd and 4th team when they've split into 2 fields. And so it's a bit concerning for him. I feel like I still think he's probably the favorite in that wide receiver 6 race. But I think the preseason for him over the last week or so has gotten a little bit more important for him, because I really thought after OTAs, after minicamp, that he was a very, very safe roster bet. And while I still think he's on the right side of the cut line for now, I don't feel as confident in saying that as I would have, prior to training camp. So he's a guy who I think needs to have a pretty strong preseason to at least cement his spot. But I think some of the buzz that he had after the start of OTAs, when he saw some reps with the ones and twos. I want to say his second week of OTAs, that buzz has kind of subsided a bit, and he's now kind of back into where a lot of people thought he would be after the draft, of having to really work his way onto the 53.
Yeah, no, that's great intel there, and I know a lot of people are super excited about Casey Washington, and I remain excited too. But I think he is someone that you might like. I've tried to caution people like. He's like a deep dynasty stash. Like if you're like one of those dynasty players that's like really looking for the next stash, like he is a deep dynasty stash, like taxi squad type guy at this point. Like, yes, he was great in OTAs, but he needed to carry that into training camp, show out, into preseason, show out, all that stuff before you really feel confident in actually slotting him into a role in this offense. Because like all the guys you just mentioned, like we've got, a top 3 or 4 guys that it's going to be really difficult to crack. Even Rondale Moore might have a hard time cracking the starting lineup if Ray McLeod is the winner at that slot spot. So it's just like, it's going to take time for him to get into the rotation. But I think going forward in future years, and, I still think he's a guy that could be sort of a backup for Drake London type of player, because they just don't have a lot of that type of receiver on the roster in terms of bigger, more physical receivers. So definitely curious to see how the rest of that shakes out. But Adnan, any final thoughts on on the receiver group, the tight end group, or anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I mean, with Casey Washington, I thought he was about to take off after that practice on Saturday. On Saturday at second year, like he had a couple of nice catches. He was being looked at often-ish by Michael Penix. Obviously, Rondale Moore remains his number one target, but yeah, I felt like he was like a number 2 target for Penix. But then, obviously that is in shorts. Since the pads have come on, I haven't really seen any of Casey Washington. Um, but yeah, we'll see. I agree that I do think he needs a stronger preseason to make that roster, especially with these new signings. The name I want to talk about when it comes to tight ends, we know that Charlie Warner, he wasn't signed for no reason. He's going to be the number 2 tight end. He had 3 catches yesterday. He was in that little sort of safety valve role for Kirk Cousins. The guy who I think right now would be my favorite for that tight end 3 spot is Ross Dwelley. Ross Dwelley had another free agent signing from San Francisco. He had, maybe the most impressive singular catch in a vacuum yesterday, in yesterday's practice. It didn't really go for many yards, but he laid out full body, caught it. He had the most impressive catch today as well, tapping his toes from Michael Penix. And then he caught a deep pass on a seam route from Michael Penix as well, which, I think was Penix's best throw of the day and was also Penix's longest completion of the day. I've been impressed by what I've seen from Ross Dwelley. I don't think I've seen him drop a single pass. He has definitely been involved with that second team offense. And, given the struggles that we've seen from John Fitzpatrick earlier in camp, especially on those first 2 days, I think Dwelley has, sort of comfortably overtaken him a little bit when it comes to that tight end 3 spot. And I think that's definitely a name to watch when it comes to the 53-man roster.
Yeah, I like that. That's good intel there as well. And I'm just excited to see, more about how they utilize some of these guys and how they get snaps to all these guys. And, mostly I'm interested in seeing if they just do the Rams method and just funnel targets to the top, the top guys, because I think fantasy players probably want that. And, if this is going to be an offense that's very much themed after the Rams, one of the core things is they want this offense to look the same every play. Like they want to line up out there and the defense to be like, well, they did that last play. and the play before and the 10 plays before that. So you don't get any clues from the formation. That's very different than what Arthur Smith did, which was trying to dictate things to the defense through a bunch of different personnel packages and formations. So it'll be a different approach, I believe. We'll see. But yeah, I know you had one more thing to add about tight ends, Daniel. So let's hear it.
Yeah, Kevin Koger, who is the position coach there, he spoke with us today, and I thought he had a lot of very valuable, very interesting things that he mentioned. One of which he said that Austin Stogner, the undrafted free agent in that room, is actually the best finisher that they have there, and has been a very teach tape guy as far as the effort that he's providing. And again, the way that he's finishing reps and blocks and things of that nature. And so when you start looking at practice squad guys, I think Stogner it has a real shot to stick. Even in, I want to say OTAs, he was nicknamed Sleep Number. I assume because of his soft hands. I would hope because of his soft hands. There might be an inside joke there. I've been meaning to ask about that for 2 months now, and it always slips my mind because there are more important things to ask than about the undrafted tight end. But, on topic, I do think that Stogner has been impressive. I think, as Adnan said, Ross Dwelly has been very good. Charlie Werner had 3 catches yesterday, I believe, which led all of the first team offense. And this is a guy who had 7 catches all of last season. And so I do think it's an interesting situation with him, because I think he'll play quite a bit. I think the Falcons, again, led the league in 12 personnel last year, will not run it as much this year, but still, when you have Kyle Pitts playing in that slot role as much as what he probably will, they will have him in line more this year. That is true. However, Werner, they really like Werner. I think it was Caleb McGarry said today how much he loves having the tight ends who are in that room now, and just how much they block and the real physicality they bring there. Werner is a legit blocking guy, but I still think that there might be more to him as a pass catcher, to where he's a true safety valve type of guy. And with Cousins being able to, as I mentioned earlier, rip through progressions the way that he is, I would like to think Werner finishes this year with more than 7 catches, but it may also end up being like a Michael Pruitt role from 2022, where the actual, volume isn't there. But I want to say Michael Pruitt tied to the team lead in 2022 with, I think, 4 touchdown receptions, which is one of my favorite stats of the 2020s. But regardless, that's an interesting room. I think there's a chance that Fitzpatrick and Stogner each make the practice squad. I think that'd be kind of, again, you're kind of limited on numbers there, but they really like them both. And with the way that, I think Fitzpatrick entered as a pretty safe practice squad guy, but I think Stogner's impressed to the point to where he may end up working his way onto that practice squad with a strong preseason.
Yeah, no, I've been impressed by what we've heard about Stogner so far, and that seems like another good UDFA find. So we'll certainly, he seems like a little bit more receiving focused than Fitzpatrick. So if they're looking for more of like a Kyle Pitts backup, he could be that kind of option. But I like all those guys. I know Fitzpatrick's had a rough start. Hopefully he can bounce back. I know they were trying out some tight ends today as well, or yesterday. So we'll see what ends up happening there if they make any signings. But I'm interested to see how it shakes out. I think those are 2 of the more interesting rooms here. But guys, fantastic stuff. Really appreciate Daniel for coming on tonight and giving us his take. He's at by Daniel Flick. He's over at Sports Illustrated's Falcon Report. Daniel, anything else you want to plug for the people before we sign off tonight?
Yeah, I fly down to Miami Monday for joint practices in the preseason game, and very excited about that. Got big shoes to fill trying to take over for Adnan as the face of Falcons videos and notes and whatnot, but we'll see what we can do. But yeah, very excited about that. And I got a lot of individual long form player profiles I've been working on for the last week or so at camp, of asking around, and feel like I have a lot of really, really good quotes and really good stories that I'll be able to tell over the next few weeks. So I'm very excited about that. Very excited about Miami. And just, I'm so glad football is back, man. I mean, it's so much fun watching guys run around in pads, and truly, truly excited and very eager to see Mercedes-Benz on Friday. It'll be my first time walking around there as a reporter, so very excited.
Absolutely. Well, we're happy to have you helping to flesh out and bolster the coverage there. Looking forward to your reports from Miami as well. We also, of course, have our Falcoholic man on the street. He is Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way. Adnan, anything else you want to let the people know about before we sign off tonight?
Yeah, I'm just gonna plug my daily recap news and notes article that I write every day. It's on thefalcoholic.com. I would also like to thank Daniel for joining us. It's always a blast hanging out with Daniel at training camp. Yeah, I think it's Daniel. I think you and Patrick are competing to see who's a bigger friend of the show at this point. Regarding how many times you each have come on. So it's like a battle, in the same way of Troy Anderson versus Nate Landman right now. It seems like a bit of a toss up at the moment, but yeah, no, definitely, love spending some time with Daniel as well. Great part of training camp. Love seeing Joe Patrick as well. We've been spending some time with him the past few days. But yeah, it's a lot of camaraderie. It's a lot of camaraderie in that media room. A lot of jokes, a lot of friendly faces. We had also. I'd be remiss if we did not shout out D'Orlando Ledbetter. Um, Terry Fontenot brought a cookie cake to you know to his media availability today to give to D'Orlando Ledbetter, who will be going into the NFL's writers wing part of the Hall of Fame next week. He's been voted in by his peers. I think he will be down in Canton to, I don't know if he'll give a speech
Collect his
or
trophy. Yeah.
how that works. But yeah, he shared his cookie cake with the rest of us as well. And yeah, Dialed, one of the nicest men you'll meet in Falcons media for sure. Even though
Yes,
I know
yes.
he has his detractors among the fan base, but guys just can't take what he tweets seriously. Like he's just
Yeah.
having.
No, he's one of those guys that like on Twitter and on the internet like acts different. Like in person he's like super nice. I think on Twitter, he's a lot more spicy. So love D-Led though. Fun guy. So congratulations to him. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on tonight's Falcoholic Live. Appreciate your subscription, appreciate your likes. Please leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Leave a comment if you've got training camp questions. We'd be happy to answer them. I definitely go through reading your stuff. If you have questions, comments, whatever, please leave those. It helps the algorithm and all that good stuff. As you guys know, if you want to get involved with our patron fantasy leagues, you can join up on the Patreon, or you can now join on the YouTube channel memberships. We're going to be kicking those off about probably midway through August. We'll get started on that stuff, so you can join up anytime from now to then. We appreciate everyone, all tiers. We're going to have access once again. Looking like we're probably going to do 2 to 3 leagues this year, so we'll see how that shakes out. Looking forward to it. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Thanks again to Daniel for hanging out. Thanks to Adnan for his reporting. And I am Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. Thank you guys for joining us. We will see you next time on the Falcoholic Live. I think given that Friday's practice is again going to be pretty late, we probably won't have a show following that event, but we will get another show out to you guys recapping the events from that practice and everything else going on probably in the next few days after that. So stay tuned for more updates on the show schedule. But until then, guys, have a great night. We will see you next time on Falcoholic Live.